So welcome to episode 4 in this ongoing series where we are building a mobile application in Flutterflow. And in this particular episode, we're going to get our hands dirty, we're going to roll our sleeves up, and we're going to start building our initial UI for our application. And that's going to set us up quite nicely in the next one, where we're then going to move from pages to then components. So without further ado, let's get into the video and let's get cracking. Okay, so as mentioned previously in this video series, in order for us to test our application, we're going to need to install some applications on our machine. Now, if you're using a Mac, you need to install Xcode, and you can install that from the Apple Store itself, and that will also include the iOS simulator. So there is a number of videos that talk you through the setup of Local Run within Flutterflow. I highly encourage you to go and check out those videos if you haven't got Local Run up and running. I'll put the link in the description of those. But what will happen is you need to make sure that before you run your application inside Flutterflow, you have like the iOS simulator up and running. So if you're using a Mac, and of course, if you're using Windows, then there's obviously different methods there in order to bring the kind of the Android kind of emulators that you need to have installed as well. But again, please do check YouTube. There's plenty of resources in order to get all of that up and running on your machine. If I just head back over to the desktop, and I'm just going to bring up the Spotlight search. So I'm just going to simply type in here, if I can get to spell it right, there goes simulator like that. Press open, and this is going to load up the iOS simulator. You saw this previously when I was running the demo application. You can see here the emulator, or sorry, the simulator I've got running here is from an iPhone 15 Plus. Nice and big on my screen, so I can get to interact with that, of course, in full screen. But of course, if you are using a device, then feel free to also be able to run up applications on your local device. I use an Android device, funny enough, but of course, Local Run works perfectly with that as well. So once we've got that in place, we can head back over to Flutterflow, and we're now set up, ready to test our application when we're ready to do that. So let's now move on and start focusing on building, or at least starting to build our application. Okay, so before we get our hands dirty and start building our user interface, I just want to mention one thing, and just a little bit of housekeeping more than anything that I like to do inside my projects. I like to rename my widgets to something a little bit more meaningful. Now, there is a reason for that, and that is because when I'm introducing things like animations, then I would like to add triggers. So to those animations, I like to play those out at a certain point. I like to be able to reference those by name. Now, if I have a number of widgets that I don't actually have a meaningful name of, then it's going to be difficult for me to determine which ones that I would like to animate itself. So just gradually get into the habit of renaming your particular widgets. And what I'll do is I'll spare you the time in this video series of me renaming most of those widgets. I'll do them in some places, but not across the board. And then you'll notice that although I haven't changed the position of those particular widgets within inside the widget tree on the left hand side, you'll see that those names will change as the video series goes on. So, and of course in the final project, of course you'll see the whole application that will have all of the widgets all nicely renamed. So with that bit out of the way, let's now crack on. Okay then, so on the left hand side of our homepage, let's put our first widget in. Now this is going to be a column because everything is going to be vertically stacked. All the widgets we're going to put in is going to be vertically stacked. Now just down on the kind of the properties down here of this particular column, you can see here that everything is going to be positioned at the top. So any new widget I add is going to be at the top, but the cross-axis alignment means that everything is going to be centered. So it's going to kind of be just sort of in the center here. Now I want to bring everything to the left hand side in my application. And that's all I need to do in this particular sort of widget at the moment. The next one I'm going to add in is then a container. Now this particular container is going to be used as a spacer at the top. So it's going to give that little bit of gap between the status bar that would be in a mobile application. It's going to bring everything down because I want my application to be a full screen application. Now there is some settings within inside of Flutterflow that can protect you from that just by general. So if you go back to the home page here, you can see that by default, when you create a brand new page, this would be toggled on, this safe area. So what this would naturally do is this would actually apply a bit of a gap between the start of your first widget and the top of the actual UI. And similarly at the bottom, you're going to see a bit of a gap here that would be automatically introduced. Now I want my application to be a full screen application, but I'm going to use a fixed height widget to naturally just push everything down. So with my container selected, in fact, let me just go back to the home page. Let me just turn off that safe area. You don't visually see it here, by the way, but inside the UI. But if I go back to my container, now if I now just go to the width here, let's just press a little option here. This is in infinity, so this is going to stretch it out the full width of the application. Now the height, I'm just going to enforce a 30 pixels in height. I'm just going to scroll down here. I'm just going to remove this fill color out. So it's pretty well much a transparent container. Now that container is going to have no other use with inside our application other than just a case of pushing down the next widget down from 30 pixels from the top. Now, of course, I could have, if I wanted to, put a widget inside the column here and actually then done a padding by kind of sort of 30 pixels. But I'll just use a container in this instance just to kind of naturally push everything down. So next up, we're going to add a row into our column. So just with our column selected, the next widget we're going to have is a row. Now, of course, this allows us to horizontally stack widgets that go inside that. Now, we need 3 in our particular application. We're going to need that little kind of star Lottie animation there on the left-hand side. Now, Lottie animation is just something that looks a little bit more animated. Then we're going to have a bit of text, and then we're going to have then another kind of like an icon or an icon button towards the right-hand side, which will allow us to do our filtering. Now, with our row, what we're going to do is we're just going to press the plus here. Let's get the basic kind of widgets in there for now. So we're going to choose Lottie and just do Lottie animation. Don't worry about the height or anything like that at the moment, or the size of the animation. The next one that we're going to put in then is a text widget, which is going to be the title of our application. And I hit the row here again, and I'm just going to choose then the icon button there, and we're just going to put an icon in there. Now, what we're going to do with our row, of course, is we're going to kind of space everything out in just a second. But of course, our Lottie animation is a little bit oversized. We want to kind of reduce the size of that animation. So just choose Lottie animation on the left. Now on the right hand side, I'm just going to scroll down here, and we're going to change the animation source to be an asset because we've actually got one already loaded up inside this particular project. But I'm just going to change the height of that here. Now we currently set it at 60 here. I think that's just a nice sort of size here for this particular animation. I'm just going to jump over here and just change the height of that. Now I'm going to go to my asset animation, just select that, and I'm going to choose my Lottie star. And you can see that's now nicely animating on the UI, but we don't want to kind of loop this animation. We don't want it to keep playing. It's going to annoy everybody if it just keeps doing that. But it's nice when the page loads just to kind of show that little bit of an animation as the page loads. Okay, so next up, what we want to do is we want to kind of put some spacing here on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and we'll space all of these out in just a moment. So with our row selected, what's really nice about our row is that down here, we can set the start and we can set the end kind of spacing here. So what I'm going to do for the start of this particular row, I'm going to put 8 pixels, it's just going to bring it across, and then the end will be 8. Now, you won't visually see anything just for a moment until this button is kind of stretched across. So the next question is going to be, well, then how do you kind of push everything across? Well, what we can do is we can use the text widget to kind of push this button over to the right-hand side. And that's really quite straight. With that being selected, we just need to choose the expansion here. And that's going to expand that text field out. It's going to push everything across. You can kind of see now that we've got the 8 pixels here on the left, and then we've got the 8 pixels here on the left. But of course, the Lottie animation has a little bit of its own spacing, but we're not too worried about that. We've got that nice amount of space that we've now got there. So that's fine. Everything's all set up. So let's now just quickly change the text now. Let's just change this now to the title of our application. It's just going to be my goals like that. We need to change the styling of this particular text as well. A little bit too small. So what I'm going to do is move down here to the right-hand side here. You can see that this is my theme text style. Now, I know that I do have one in this particular project, which is perfect for me, and that's this headline small here. It's got a 24 pixel sort of size here for the actual text size, so just choose that, and that's nicely set for me. So that's perfect for my application. Now we need to work on the actual button itself. This looks a little bit ugly, so we can get this one sorted pretty quickly. So let's now move the fill color. We don't want that, and we can remove the border color. Now with the button size, we can make this just slightly bigger, so it's got a bit more of a region for us to tap, and the border radius I'm just going to choose up to 30 as well. So there we go. You won't see the visual sort of change there, but at least I've now got a nice kind of circular look to my button when I hold my sort of finger on that within inside my mobile application. So if you were to reduce this to say like 20 or 15, you'll find that this won't be a perfect circular when you kind of hover your finger over, or at least sort of suppress it just slightly before actually, double sort of single tapping. So that's all nicely set up. We just need to sort the icon out. We just want to change this now to like a more filter looking icon. So let's just do a little search here, choose filter, just scroll down here. We've got a nice little filter icon that's going to work for us. What's this one here? Yeah, that one was good, but just choose the outline one, just select that. So we've got that perfectly set. Now I just want to increase the icon size just slightly there. It's currently 24. Let's just increase the size just a little bit more. Everything else is all nicely set. We don't need to make any further changes to any of these particular properties. So I think that's pretty well much it for our top kind of sort of navigation bar, I guess, the sort of the top bar there for our application. I'm going to quickly go through now and rename all of these widgets before we move on to the next section. So I'm just going to quickly do that now. And just going to change this one here to filter icon button like that. So all nicely renamed. Right, that's excellent. So now we can move on now to just collapsing that. We don't need to do any work there just for the time being. Let's now continue to add more widgets to our UI. Okay, so next up we're going to add another widget into our page, and this is going to be another column, but there's a slight difference with this particular column. We're going to set up to be scrollable because as we add more and more dynamic content in there, so more and more goals, they're likely going to fall off of the actual screen. So we want to provide the user the ability to kind of scroll up and down. So with the page column selected, just press plus, hit the column here. Now with the properties on the right hand side, all we need to do is just select this option here to be scrollable, and I'm going to set this as primary. It's the only scrollable widget that I've got on the UI, so we're going to keep that as primary, so there's no kind of conflict with any other kind of scrollable kind of column. I'm just going to quickly rename my widget here because I always like to instantly rename that to be a scrolling column. That's kind of what I like to call my widgets. Now as you can see, it's tucked up here to the top left hand side. I don't need to set up any other properties or anything like that particular here because every widget we put inside our column is going to kind of probably expand out that particular column itself. So just hit plus here. The next one we're going to add in is a list view, and this will become super important in just a moment. So just choose list view here, and you can see that that's now stretched everything out to the right hand side. Now what you can see is because the list view is kind of expanded right out, we want to kind of bring our list view in from the left and from the right because we're going to be putting some widgets within inside that particular list view in a second. So of course we're going to want those off the edges of our application. But we also want to allow our scrollable column to kind of breathe. So if you were building a web application, for example, and you were wanting to see like that scroller indicator that appears on the right hand side, you don't want that scroller indicator to overlap with any of the content which is inside the list view. So that's why I like to put my scrollable kind of columns as a parent to then the items actually inside that will become scrollable. So you can see here, that's right to the edge of the screen. The list view is now in. So all I need to do is now just go to left 18 and my right 18, and you can see that I've now naturally brought everything in off the edges of the actual screen. Okay, so next up, let's add a container to our list view. Now, eventually this will become dynamic because, of course, we are going to be pulling data from our database. So let's firstly add the container in. So just go to container. Let's set up some properties of that particular container here. So with our border radius, let's just select a uniform radius. And we're just going to kind of give our container some kind of rounded edges. And I'm just going to scroll down here as well. I want to put a little subtle shadow at the bottom of our container. So just choose this here, and all these values are actually fine for us in this particular instance. We just use the standard shadow color here because we're using the white kind of theme here. Now the blur is fine, the offset is fine of Y, so this is going to kind of push this blur below here. Now because this offset is 0, it means that the blur is not appearing on the right or the left, but of course I could come along here and I could put 2 in here. You can just see the blur that's just on there. Similarly, I could just do -2 and it will appear on the left hand side, but we're just going to keep this as 0 just so we have everything just sitting off the bottom. If I just click away here, you can see now we've got kind of what looks like our card. Now, if you remember back when I was doing the intro to this particular series, we were looking at the starter project and we had some theme style widgets. Now, the theme style widgets are kind of just preset themes that can be applied to widgets, and we had one here for the container. Now, I'm just going to select the container. And up the top here, you've got this option for theme style widgets. And I've already created one called Container Primary. So what I could do now is I could right click and I can now say save as a theme style widget. Now that will then allow me to then apply this particular theme style to many, many different containers, which means that if I then go down here into the palette and I want to go over to theme style widgets, I can come into the Container Primary and I can modify some of the values in here. And as soon as I hit save, that style will then be applied across all of the containers inside my application. But remember, it's only the ones that has the little link here that are where the values will be applied. The ones that have the little cross through, you can eliminate those from being adjusted. So for example, if I didn't want to apply the width and the height, which I'm not doing in this case, I've got this little kind of strike through on the little link. So, but these other ones here can be obviously adjusted. If I just want to globally set the blur to be then say 6, I can change that, hit save, and of course that will then be applied across all of the theme style widgets. So I just want to mention that why we're there. I'm just going to cancel that. There we go. So let's go back now to the UI. So of course what I'm going to do here for this particular example, just going to go up to theme style unset, choose container primary, and now that's now linked to my theme style widget, which as I said has got the same look and feel of everything else I had previously. So we've got some kind of explicit widths and heights set. Now we're going to want to remove these, and as soon as we remove these you'll notice that the container will suddenly collapse into nothing, because we're going to use the actual child widgets here to set the kind of the dynamic height of the actual container itself. So with our container selected, we're going to add another column in here, so just set column, and you can now see that anything I now put in here, well, of course, will now expand that particular container out. So that sets us up quite nicely. We're now adding all of the child widgets that we need within inside our actual column. We'll go and do that now. Okay, so now it's time to now create all of the widgets that's going to represent our particular goal within inside our application. So we've got the goal column, we've got everything we need in place there. Let's now start working our way through and create all the widgets that we are requiring. So hit the plus here. The first one we're going to add in is a row, because we're going to want to represent the actual title and the details and description, should I say, of our actual goal. We're now going to add in another one here. So just let's put another row in here. So this particular row here is going to be kind of the top level information for our actual goal itself, and then the row is going to represent kind of like the number of tasks, how many completed that we've got, and of course the date of the actual goal that's being created. So the first one I'm going to work on is the one that's got the goal information. So just press the plus there. So this is now going to be made up of a column. Now within inside that particular column, we're going to have a number of kind of child widgets in here. So the first one is going to be then a row, which is then going to contain a text widget like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very simply just right click and duplicate. And you can see here now I've got one just below there. So you can see here that the text at the top here is going to be our goal title, and this is going to be our goal description. What I'm also going to do is just go up to this particular column here, press the plus, and I'm just going to do a search for progress bar like that. Let's just put that in there. We'll sort that out in just a second. In fact, we'll probably just sort it out. We've got the progress bar is currently set as circular. We need it to be linear, and then we'll have very shortly a representation of our progress bar. We'll style this up very, very shortly. So let's move now down to our next row. That's just down here. It's just kind of off the bottom of the screen here. Let's just press a plus. And the first thing we're going to do is put an icon in here. So just do a search for icon, press the plus there. Let's just scroll down a little bit. Let's add another one in here. This is now going to be a piece of text like that. Let's add another plus in here. This is going to be another icon itself, which is going to kind of be our little calendar icon. And then finally, we're just going to put another text widget in there as well. So we kind of got all of the essentials in there. Now I'm just going to quickly go through and just going to quickly rename all of these so they're a little bit more meaningful to exactly what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so there's all the widgets all nicely renamed here on the left-hand side. Feel free to go ahead and rename these yourself, but you don't need to do that in your example. Of course, if you want to grab the staged projects as we move through this particular series, then you're going to kind of get all of those yourself. So you don't kind of need to do that if you would like to work in that particular way. So we just need to sort out something here. This is not looking particularly pretty here. Let's sort that out first. So we can click on the goal details row here. We're going to do something very similar that we did before. We're going to click on this task account text, which is here. We're going to kind of push all of those widgets over to the right hand side. So just choose the expansion option that moves across here. Now with the goal details row here, we're going to implement some spacing here because everything is all nicely sort of tucked together here. So with the item spacing, let's just choose 8. I think that would be an acceptable amount here. And of course, we can now set some padding with inside our goal details row, so we can bring everything off of the edges. So up the top right here, with that selected, let's just choose 16, and then we're going to choose 16 here as well. So that's now nicely set. Now with the actual goal column itself, we want to implement some spacing between these rows here. So what we can do here is on the right hand side, let's just choose 12 for item spacing. So we've now got a little bit of spacing in between. Now start spacing, end spacing, let's now kind of set that. We can set this as 16. So we're just going to bring from the top there, 16 from the bottom, and that's nicely spaced everything out for us so far. Okay, so now with our goal detail column, you see here it needs to be kind of expanded out. We want everything to kind of move across. So just with the goal detail column, let's just choose the expansion, and you can see everything is now fully expanded out. But of course, you can see here now that everything is hard up against the edges. So what we're going to do here is we're not going to adjust the goal detail column. We're going to actually adjust it on the actual rows itself. So with that selected, let's just choose 16 here and then 16 on the right. That everything keeps it all nicely uniform here. Now everything within inside these particular rows, you can see the text will kind of expand out. That's all fine for us. We're not going to see any overlapping on the actual goal description text, though. We're going to find that in fact we'll do it for both, but the goal title and the goal description, if the text kind of extends beyond the size, so instead of getting like an overflow error where the text just kind of runs off the page here, let's just expand the actual text, the goal title text here, and then the goal description text. And what that will mean is that when our text becomes too large, it will wrap down to the next line. Now what we want to do as well, with the goal detail column selected, let's just move to then the item space, and let's just give this a slight little gap in between. That's perfect. So let's quickly sort out then our icons here. On the task icon, let's just choose this one. Let's just look for, say, tasks like that. Do we have a nice icon that represents a series of tasks? Let's go to the font awesome. There we go, that'll do nicely. There we go. And we just need to adjust the size actually a little bit too big. So let's just drop that down to then 16 like that. And what we're going to do is also just do this particular one while we're here. Let's set this to then be a calendar. Let's just do a search for a calendar. So anything that looks like that'll do. I think we'll just take that particular calendar there. That's fine. Just need to do the same thing here as well. Let's just drop that down to 16. And then we've got a nice little calendar icon. Let's just quickly sort out the progress bar here as well. While we're here, let's just go to click on progress bar, and let's just change these values here. So don't worry too much about the actual value at the moment, because of course this is going to be dynamic from our database. Let's just take the width off like that so it stretches right across. With the thickness, let's just change that to 5 so it's nice and thin. Just going to scroll down here. Is there anything else? Let's take off the text there. We don't need that. We're going to implement our own kind of look and feel to the little bit of text that sits over the top there. Everything else should be all good. So that's good. That just gets that all nicely set up. So you can see now that we're starting to kind of construct the look and feel of the kind of the dynamic card. There will be some other little adjustments that we'll make in terms of kind of spacing and all that kind of stuff, but we'll come in sort of tune that a little bit later. But that's a good start. Let's now move on to the next bit. Okay, so next up we're going to create what is called a FAB button, and this is going to kind of sit down in the bottom right hand corner, kind of float above everything else within inside our user interface. This is going to allow us to create a task within inside our application. So how do we create a FAB button? Really straightforward. Go to the home page here, hit the plus, and if I just do a search for FAB, now you'd expect it to kind of filter down and find it for us, but we do have to scroll down a little bit. I don't know why it's happening like this, and then just choose FAB like that, and you can see now that it appears quite nicely in the bottom corner. Now you can see here that within inside the widget tree, it sits right down here at the bottom. I'm just going to select the icon here. I'm just going to change the icon color. Now inside this application side, our starter project that we started with, we had this custom color called primary button text. That is what we're going to select here. And then of course, if I now click away, you can see now we've got this nice kind of white icon that now represents our plus. Now if I just interchange that between the kind of the dark and the light theme here, you can see that everything is looking quite nice in our application. So now that's in place, we're going to use that and a little bit later in order to kind of show the kind of the bottom bar that's going to appear from the bottom, which is then going to allow us to create a task.